And welcome everybody to the Shula Bowl Podcast, episode 121. I think it's been a hot minute, gentlemen, since the last one of these things rolled out. But we are so excited and very thankful to the 5 Reasons Sports Network for reviving this show. It's produced a lot of great memories over the years on a rivalry that is still strong between the FIU Panthers and the FAU Owls. Now, I am your neutral host, Jake Gibson, joined alongside our FIU rep, Kevin Barral, and our FAU rep, Kevin Fielder. Now, we have some awesome discussions later on in the show about, well, a lot of things that have happened since the last time the Shula Bowl podcast has been run. But before that, I think it's fair to do a passing of the torch segment. Now, if you're going to do a passing of the torch segment, you need some of the OGs to come back for a minute. So that's exactly what we did. I'd like to bring on to the show now the great Eric Henry and David Hondo, who have been running the Shula Bowl podcast for a while now. And like I said, we're getting the keys. We're getting the torch and moving forward with the Shula Bowl pod. But before we do that, we have to go back. So welcome, gentlemen.
Oh, man, what is going on, Jake, Kevin, and Kevin Fielder? What is going on, guys? This is, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know if this day would ever come. You know, I didn't know if we'd ever get a chance to pass the torch, give this thing off, put this show in great hands. And it certainly is in that, Jake. I've obviously had a chance to work alongside you back in the day when I was covering FIU and you were a student. You've always been great. Kevin, you talk about passing of the torch. He is the guy who was picked up the FIU beat since I've moved on to Texas, and he's taken to new heights, covering football, basketball, baseball, all great things. He just broke the contract agreement between Penn State and FIU earlier this week, so that's a good reason to follow him. And this last guy, you know, I was debating on whether I want to actually be nice or just.
You don't have to be, Eric. You don't have to be, Eric. Let's be clear.
But since this is the first of the relaunch of the Shula Bowl podcast, Kevin Fielder, one of the finest young journalists, and folks, he is available. Go hire him if you are watching or listening. But one of the finest young reporters out there, like a little brother of mine. So I cannot think of better reps. And of course, my guy, Hondo.
I was waiting. I want to see what nice words you got to say about me.
No, listen. I'm going to save all my nice words for you, Jake and Kevin. And Kevin were nice enough to give us time to reminisce. I'm going to save all my nice words during the reminiscing portion of the show. But I've talked long enough, Hondo. It's all you, brother.
I love it. Yeah, piggybacking off what you said. It honestly, it was just exciting to hear that you guys are picking it back up from where we left, and I honestly didn't know if that would ever happen, and the fact that it is, and with you three, it couldn't be more excited, and honestly honored that you guys would have me and Eric back on, the old heads. I feel like, look at us, the old heads that you can officially call us. But yeah, no, super excited to be here. Super grateful that you guys taking this thing over. I mean, the Shula Bowl pod holds a very, very special place in my heart for sure. So I'm excited to see what you guys can do with it.
Yeah, you two, I mean, have put on the work for this podcast over the years. And now, what are you two doing now? Eric, you're over in SEC territory covering the Longhorns. And David, you and the old man doing great work on the Tranquilo Sports Network. But
yes,
I wanted to ask you guys about just some of your favorite memories of the Shula Bowl podcast over the years. Some of the people you've had the pleasure of interviewing, some of the wildest takes you've made, and any other great nuggets you two may have had.
I'm curious. Did FIU actually win the Shula Bowl podcast? Like during the Shula Bowl while you guys did the podcast?
What do you think,
no,
Kevin?
No, they have not. We don't touch on that. You know,
Hondo, happy to touch on it. I feel like as the FAU representative, I feel like someone has to say I would be more than happy to touch on the recent history of the rivalry game.
Yeah, unfortunately, no wins under our belt. But in terms of moments, at least on the FIU side, during this tenure, the Miami win ranks number one. That was in terms of games and you know, that's probably number one. In terms of memories, I can kick that one off. One of my favorite memories was, and Eric's already, I think he's got a grin on his face. If I bring up Tulane, when me and Eric, we went to Tulane, obviously Eric was covering, and I was doing this as a fan. It's because for the love of the game. I was the non-journalist of the group, and let's say I somehow found myself in the Butch Davis presser with one too many drinks under me. I had no idea how I ended up there, and not literally. I don't know how I was like, why am I here? And then that was like the first time me and Eric really got to hang out during this whole tenure. So that one's a fun.
Did you ask him anything?
No.
Okay.
I think he can smell the beer off me. I mean, Eric, I think that was the
Okay.
first thing he told me. I was like, dude, you smell reek of beer. I'm like, yeah, I've been drinking for like 6 hours. Like this is.
I can piggyback off of Dave and just say, yeah, gosh, one of the things I'm most grateful for with this pod is, and I genuinely forgotten how long we've been doing this, right? Wow. Obviously, it's been dormant for a while, but I was trying to rack my brain, like, how long had we been doing the pod? So it's crazy to think I'm entering my third season covering the Longhorns, and I spent 5.5 covering FIU. But yeah, the 2019 season was the first year. I remember getting, I can't remember if David reached out to me or Shane. First off, shout out Shane Marinelli.
Yeah.
We also shout out Hondo. We shout out all the OGs, right?
Yeah, all the OGs.
Andre Dunand, right? That's Dunand. Yep. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Dunand, yeah.
Dunand.
Who I'm rocking tranquilo with.
Shane Marinelli, of course, now works for the FAU program as the director of high school relations, I believe Shane's title is, and Jake Ellman as well. We were a 5, just like we're doing this 5-man weave right here. We're a 5-person weave, and I'll start there.
That's crazy.
That was one of my earliest memories, Dave, because I'm sure you remember how challenging it was. Like Jake Ellman was covering FAU at the time. I'm covering FIU. Hondo is coming in as a fan. Andre's coming in as a fan, and Shane's basically like he had just started doing his thing, covering high schools, was a fan. And all 5 of us are trying to weave our way through. And then it finally was like, okay, someone's got to be a host. Someone's got to be willing to take a back seat, and eventually it made its way down to 3, myself, Shane, and David. And then once Shane took the role at FAU, he, of course, couldn't continue doing it, so it became me. But no, I remember, Hondo mentioned the Tulane thing. I'll tell that quick for fans who don't remember or fans who are new. Like the great thing about Jake, Kevin, and Kevin taking over is there are new fans. There's a new generation of FAU and FIU fans. Won't remember the Butch Davis era. Won't remember the Lane Kiffin era, right? Or the Willie Taggart era, so on and so forth. But this team, the 2019 FIU team, was coming off a 9-win season, Bahamas Bowl victory. Everyone's fired up. You're heading to Tulane, quote unquote, bigger name opponent. And the Panthers, quite frankly, got smoked. It was 49-14, if memory serves me correct, was the final score of that game. It was something like 21-0, 28-0. And I remember getting the text from David, like, man, same old FIU. And this was like my first experience of like, okay, you get built up to get let down. And yeah, Hondo came to the presser with me. He kind of just like, if you've never been to Tulane, Kevin, you've been to Tulane, right?
No, I actually have not.
Sorry, Kevin Fielder. I'm sorry, Kevin Fielder.
I have not. No,
K-State
played them this year. K-State played them this year, but I was not there. So that was the one road game I didn't attend.
For people who probably don't know this, for media, you enter through like a side entrance, like where their baseball facility is, and then you walk around like a dirt path to get to the entrance of their stadium. So I'm only saying that Jake Gibson, that's what I'm saying. Of course, I would call out Jake Gibson, like there's more than one Jake now. In that you have to walk past that dirt path to kind of head out to the street. So I just see David. I'm like, Dave, what's going on? After I saw that he had, made his way down to the sideline. And he just hops in the presser. It was me. Dave, was it me and you? Was someone else was there, right?
It was me, you, Drucker.
And Drucker, David Drucker. Shout out David Drucker.
Yeah.
People there. Yeah. So that made for entertaining. But yeah, I guess a favorite memory other than that, Miami win, of course. I remember being in Murfreesboro or Nashville, but via Murfreesboro, Tennessee, when FIU legendarily got just ran through by Middle Tennessee. Doing an episode of this podcast from a little like booth inside of Nashville International Airport. Remember that? But yeah, man, like I'll save some of this to the end because obviously we're already at 10 minutes. But the thing I'm most grateful for is I've made lifelong friends in Hondo and Shane. Obviously I am the third Hondo son. For those who may not know,
it is true.
So I got a chance to make lifelong friends in David and Eddie, and same thing with Shane. So yeah, man, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm going to jump in here on that. You took the words out of my mouth. I mean, in terms of not to get too cheesy here, but that's my favorite part of it all. I mean, me, Shane, and Eric, still. I mean, we still talk a ton. We're still. I mean, one of my favorite memories is actually not even recording when all three of us went to the Lightning Panthers.
Yeah,
we would link up for other things, and we became legitimate good friends, and that was truly the best part of it. I mean, Shane, that I hope he's listening. That psychopath. He came for one of the Stanley Cup games. Came all the way from Boca to watch the game with me in the Grove, and you know, so it's just cool that you know we're still super close, and it's because of this show. So 100%, Eric, I'm with you. That would be my number one memory.
That must be a fun bonding event within the Shula Bowl pod to go to a Panthers Lightning game, fellas. The Kevins, we got to write that down. Save that for when the next season starts. But I'm interested. You guys have had plenty of really high profile guests across FIU and FAU on the show. Who have been some of your favorite guests you've gotten to the show, and which ones said either the funniest, cringiest, or the most or the hottest takes you remember them saying?
Jonathan Mayer has to be up there.
Most definitely. Hondo, you wanna kick it off?
Yeah, I've got one. It would be my dad. My dad when we brought him on after the Miami win. And I honestly don't even remember. I don't think he remembers what he was saying. He was just rambling so much, dogging Miami. It was just that was probably my favorite moment because of obviously what that win meant for us, and just being able to share that moment with him and getting him on the show to just let loose. So that was probably my favorite quote unquote guest.
I tried to think through this because we've had so many people on. I mean, listen, Kevin Fielder was a guest at one point in time, so he certainly would count as a high-profile guest.
You say anything controversial?
Maybe not a good one. Maybe not a good guest, Eric, but definitely high-profile.
Hondo, did we ever get Mike McIntyre on the podcast?
We did not. No.
Okay, because I know I interviewed Mac several times for when I was working with SB Nation, the Underdog Dynasty podcast. I couldn't remember. I felt like we got a coach on at some point in time. I know we did not get Butch on.
We did not get Butch. The other one that popped into my head immediately was Jonathan Cyprian. We had Cyprian on. We had a few players. I remember during one of the Shula Bowls, we had Cyprian. I know we had somebody from FAU that. Yeah,
I'm trying to remember. Kevin, your era FAU.
You have to be specific here, Eric.
Okay, Kevin Fielder, your era FAU receiver, little white receiver.
Dante
Kozar.
Yes.
Dante Kozar. Yep. Yeah, I remember having him. That was the FAU player, David.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Dante Kozar. We had I know we had a couple more players from the FIU because remember we did like the reminiscing of the Shula Bowl week, right? And I've got a couple more. I can't remember, but no. To Hondo's point, that definitely the interview with his dad was definitely fun and being serious. Like I know we had Kevin on more than once. Kevin Fielder on more than once.
We did.
He was a great guest as well.
Well, we had to. I remember because obviously when Shane left, we were missing the void of the owl side of things because Jacob was already gone too. So Kevin came on quite a few times.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's okay, boys. Getting Mike McIntyre on the podcast isn't for everybody. Kev from FIU. Why did you bring up Jonathan Mayer? What was that episode like?
I don't actually remember. He was a student back in the day. I just listened. Okay. I ran into the episode once, but like they had him on. So
okay, I got you.
We did.
What is the craziest hot take you remember either yourself or someone else saying about FIU or FAU or I don't know, maybe even something else that just randomly showed up on the pod?
I feel like Shane has 100 of them.
So hot takes. Shane Marinelli has 100 of them. I can give mine really quick. Anything in the 2019 season where I thought FIU would be better than they were.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, for me, I just laughed at the Shane comment. Like, if I don't only throw out hot takes too, because I just predicted FIU to go 12-0 every single year. Like Eric is there, like trying to like give a real, like we're talking real things. I'm just there. Yeah, win, marking off win every single year. And honestly, not to throw a dig at FIU. Obviously, I love them to death, but anytime we're talking about the Shula Bowl, any of those years turned out to be hot takes by the end of the game. So,
okay, that's fair.
Jake and I feel you on that one.
Yeah, I didn't feel like
last year.
I didn't feel like we'd be hitting FIU as much as we've been doing so far this episode, but it's all good. It's all good. It's all fair and love and war, I suppose. But now, don't get it twisted. While Eric's covering the Texas Longhorns, he's still an FIU faithful by heart, and obviously David very well familiar with the FIU Panthers themselves. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the new regimes here in South Florida with the Panthers and the Owls. Both teams radically different from past seasons, both looking for more wins, less losses, and overall, I feel like there's a lot of excitement in the air between the two schools in Miami and Boca. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I've got nothing but great things to say about Willie. I had the chance, actually, we had him on Tranquilo Sports, and just an awesome guy. But just everything that he's building, the culture and the coaching staff that he's put around him, everything that I've seen pretty much in the offseason, it's not only just on the things that I've seen, whether it's spring on the field, it's everything he's doing off the field as well, trying to get more people involved. And I've seen him at a bunch of events that we've done, like trying to get people obviously to invest more into FIU football. He's doing all the right things. And yeah, I mean, I have very high expectations like I do every single year, but I have a very good feeling and everything that I've heard from whether other coaches on the staff or players that I've talked to, that everyone's bought in, and that's one of the most important things going into a year. So I've got nothing but good things for Willie, and I've got high hopes.
Yeah, I'll quickly touch on FIU as well. It's been a weird, strange trip. I mean, obviously, the great thing about our pod is that David came from the fan perspective, and I came from the perspective of covering the team. And I remember being in Hattiesburg, the final game of the Butch Davis era, driving from Tampa to Hattiesburg. Would not recommend that for anybody, but I digress. I remember the Mike McIntyre hire. I remember the coaching search around it. I remember Javon DeWitt, current FIU defensive coordinator, being interviewed for the job. I remember Willie Simmons being interviewed for the job. I remember Tim Harris being interviewed for the job, and the people who wanted Tim Harris the first time. And then I remember kind of trying to talk FIU fans off the ledge when I broke the news, a little cheap plug there, that Mike McIntyre was being hired. And where you thought things would go, and with Mac, how the recruiting, and listen, Mike McIntyre just texted me. Kevin, I meant to ask you, Kevin Barral, did Mac text you happy 4th of July?
No.
Oh no! All right, I guess that was just me. I just spoke with Mike McIntyre earlier this week.
I haven't said a word to him since he's gone.
Hey, Kevin, there's a guy named Rodney Terry who just was fired at Texas. That's how that works.
Yeah.
RT, never gonna hear from the guy ever again.
Exactly.
No, on a serious note, the recruiting never kind of got to where you thought it would be, him recruiting South Florida. He was getting guys, but it feels different with Willie Simmons. It feels a little bit more like the Butch Davis type of recruiting, and listen, I could go down some long rabbit hole about NIL and rev share and the disadvantages of G5s. Just from feel, it feels different with Willie Simmons. And of course, the guys were interviewed again. So I think I've done, little look at Nick Coleman's offense, right? Okay. See a couple things there. Javon DeWitt still in place as a DC. So I think that's great. Kewan Jenkins back 3rd year. So excited to see where the program goes. And quickly on FAU, I'm a big Zach Kitley guy. I can't remember if it was Kevin Fielder and I or Shane, someone I've had this conversation with years ago. And I would have loved Zach Kitley at FIU. I understand that you couldn't sell that hire after the Mike McIntyre hire, but Hondo and I have talked about this, I'm pretty sure at some point. I would love to see the air raid run in South Florida. You're telling me you're going to get South Florida athletes, right? You can find 4 guys as far as, receivers in the air raid, South Florida. You can find a little jet slot guy, put him at running back. He's going to catch the ball in the backfield. I'm super interested to see how the air raid works in Boca. You'll get that talent up there in Boca and come down to Broward and Palm Beach and see how that works. But I'm super excited to see how that works, because I've thought for a long time someone should try the air raid in South Florida, just with the athletes, the talent. It's going to be incredible. So yeah, I'm super interested with both hires, and I'm curious to see how they play out.
Yeah, no, great points from both of you there. So It's been fun so far, reminiscing about the Shula Bowl podcast and the memories they have made for pretty much everyone here in this pod currently. So before you guys head out, I'd like to ask you guys for your final thoughts, specifically both of you, as well as where the fans, like I believe you mentioned, Eric, the new fans that are watching this, where they can see the work that both you and David Hondel are doing. So we'll start off with Eric here. Talk about your final thoughts here.
Yeah, final thoughts. Again, can't thank you guys enough. Hey, listen, we also thanked everyone, Ethan Skolnick, for giving us the opportunity. Yep. Ethan gave Dave and I the opportunity, long before. I can't remember if I even had the SB Nation podcast at that point in time, so him taking a chance on a young writer. And obviously, thank you to all of the FIU fans, right, or even just FAU and FIU, because without that engagement, you guys reading my stories and all the things that came together, the opportunity of Texas would not have come together. So last, I guess I'll quickly share, I guess my favorite Shula Bowl memory. They all, in my time covering, were all FAU wins, So I guess the one that stands out the most, and Kevin Fielder will remember this, the one where the post-game fracas broke out afterwards, where FAU, I can't remember who it was trying to take, it might have been Evan Anderson, but I don't want to accidentally slander Evan, tried to take the FIU sticker and ended up being a whole thing where it's thrown back at the FIU the locker room. I just remember that game being like, man, this team it's going to be a struggle in the Shula Bowl, and it still has. But that aside, it's the rivalry. They are each other's true rivals. I don't care about conference alignment or anything like that. So super excited to see the Shula Bowl rivalry continue, to see the Shula Bowl pod continue. You can find me at Eric C. Henry _ on Twitter, and find my Texas coverage, SEC coverage, football, basketball, baseball at 24/7 Sports and horns247.com.
And he still likes to talk about FIU every now and then.
Yes, he
Don't
does.
get it twisted.
Yes, he does.
David, take things away.
Yeah. In terms of, we've touched a bit on memories, but just a huge thank you. Eric mentioned Ethan Skolnick. I remember when he first put out the tweet that he's looking for two people to cover FIU and FAU, and just a bunch of people were tagging me and Shane. I had no idea who Shane was at this point. And we're like, I guess you're the other guy. I'd never done a podcast in my life, and we met at a Flanagan's. So this is actually the idea of how this show even started, of some of the ideas we had, started at a Flanagan's, and now it is where it is now, and I'm super excited about it. Funny, I love the video aspect of it. We didn't do this, Eric. We were just strictly audio. I prefer this. But yeah, this is the true rivalry for FIU, FAU. I'm glad that it's being continued. I'm glad that it's being continued played even against cross divisions, and yeah, I'm just super excited for it. I'm super excited for you guys. I'm super excited to tune into this show each week or however you guys are doing it. But I'm very excited for this. Super excited for everything that we've done with it. Hope to come back one day on this thing, and yeah, you can still find me. You can find me on Twitter at DavidHondel _. Still going to be talking a ton about FIU and a bunch of South Florida sports, especially shout out to the Florida Panthers. Eric didn't want to hear that. And then you can find me on Tranquilo Sports, again, talking all sports and golf. And then if you love movies, you see the whole movie background, check out Hondo's Blockbuster. That's my newest venture. So that's where you'll find me. And you'll see me at the Cage every Saturday.
There you go.
And midweek games.
Yeah, quite a few.
I'll be there every week, even on bye weeks.
There you go. Who's winning the Shula Bowl?
Easy, FIU.
FAU.
Oh,
Great answer, Eric. Great answer.
I'm clipping that part now.
This truly is a house divided.
I just had to give an answer to balance it out, fellas.
Alrighty, gentlemen. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We may or may not have you guys back on some future episodes, maybe even as we get a little bit closer to the season. But thank you guys so much for hopping on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate
Thank you for having us.
All righty. How awesome was that? That was David Hondel and Eric Henry, two Shula Bowl podcast legends. So let's get right into talking a bit about FIU and FAU here. Now, here's how this is going to work. For the episodes where it is me, as well as the two Kevins, I will be the neutral host. I will not pick a side. I'm just here to ask questions, maybe get some thoughts, but I'll leave the takes to these two gentlemen. Now, it needs to be asked. How are we doing this? Am I referring to you guys as Mr. Barral, Mr. Fielder? I call Kevin Kev every now and then. Mr. Fielder, do you have a nickname?
So Jake, most people just call me Fielder.
Fielder.
So it is a very unironic nickname. And because there are two Kevins here, it may just be better to refer me as Fielder. Because I feel like if we just kept going Kevin every single episode, it would become truly chaotic after about 5 minutes.
Well, I'm glad we sorted that out as soon as possible. So without further ado, let me formally welcome in everyone. I am Jake Gibson. I'll be the host, and we have none other than Kevin Barral, who will be our representative for the FIU Panthers. And joining us today is Kevin Fielder, who will be our representative for the Florida Atlantic Owls. Like what I did there? Alrighty. Let's get it rolling here. Now, this is an introductory episode, is it not? So before we really get going here, I'd like to quickly ask you guys to quickly introduce yourself, talk about your connections to your respective university, what other work you guys are doing, and where you can find everybody. I'll start things off myself, though. I am Jay Gibson. I do work for Lemon City Live, where I do cover FIU football and am the host of the Pause Up podcast. You can follow me on all platforms at Jake the MC. Now we'll turn things over to Kevin Barral. Talk about your connections to FIU, Kev.
Yeah, what's up? I'm Kevin Barral. I cover FIU football for Sports Illustrated's G5 Football Daily. I also do work for Lemon City Live. I cover the baseball team. I do some stuff to dabble with basketball and the soccers. And I'm also the co-host of the Pause Up podcast along with Jake. And I cover the Miami Marlins for Fish on First. So you could just follow me right there, Kevin_Barral on Twitter or X. And just make sure to follow along, as well as the Pause Up podcast and G5 Football Daily.
Now, I guess to the OGs, Fielder needs no introduction because he's been on the show before, but we'll give him one anyway. Go ahead, Kevin Fielder. Talk to the people about your connection to FAU.
What's up, guys? I feel like the Spirey veteran of this podcast, the 6-year senior that is still here somehow.
There you go.
My name is Kevin Fielder. I used to cover Florida Atlantic full-time for Owls 24/7. I was there when because I feel like this has to be mentioned at some point during the Shula Bowl podcast when FAU made the Final Four, and we don't talk about what happened in the Final Four. That game did not happen. You can't convince me that game was real.
Right.
But regardless, I covered Florida Atlantic for about 5 years, then moved on to covering K-State. But, FAU alum, spent 4 years there, spent 4 years of my hard-earned money there. So, excited to start talking about the team that has a stranglehold on this rivalry game, the Florida Atlantic Owls. You can find me on Twitter at the Kevin Fielder. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Kevin Fielder.
Fielder is the Carson Beck of the Shula Bowl podcast. He's been kicking it.
Oh, God.
A minute.
Now, I may have been on this podcast when Carson Beck started playing football, so that may not be
there you go. Now, by the way, Kevin is a current student at FIU. Fielder, on the other hand, is a graduate. What class were you?
Oh, boy. I believe it was 2023. I get asked this question every single time I'm on an FAU-related thing, and I'm just like, I don't remember. It was a year.
I don't blame you.
There you go. And I am a grad class of 2022 at FIU. Let's kick things off here, gentlemen, talking about some football, shall we? Now, this upcoming season for FIU and FAU is going to be one of the most interesting ones as far as newcomers, because there's one position where both teams have a new person in, and that is going to be the head coach, for FIU being Willie Simmons and for FAU being Zach Kitley. So I wanted to ask you guys about your thoughts on the hires, what they've done so far that has impressed you, maybe not impressed you, and how you feel they're going to be able to lead this team going forward. I'll start it off with Kev, talking about the Panthers.
Yeah, so after 3 straight 4-8 seasons, FIU fired head coach Mike McIntyre, ended up going with Willie Simmons, former Florida A&M head coach, was recently at Duke as the running backs coach / assistant coach. I think it's a great hire. I mean, Willie was in it for the first time around when FIU went with Mike McIntyre, interviewed for the job, and I think he built out a great staff this time around. He's going to be here for a pretty long time, hopefully. And Nick Coleman's his OC. Jovan DeWitt returning as the DC. He kept Jovan DeWitt on the staff, who also was a finalist for the job this time around once again. Brought in Jelani Barras as wide receivers coach. Frank Ponce, who also interviewed in 2022 for the job, as well as this time around, is the tight ends coach, also like a special assistant coach. Mm-hmm. And Kenneth Gilstrap is the DC. And then Benedict Hippolyte's here as the running backs coach. Ed Pata, offensive line coach. So completely new staff. Anthony Gator's another returner. So is Kenechi Udeze. But I think Willie so far has done a great job. We look at recruiting. We look at the transfer portal. Different approach from the former staff. Not going too much into the JUCO ranks. Instead of actually bringing in guys who were at the Power 4 level, decided to go back down to the Group of 5 or decided to come back home to South Florida. I think FIU really killed it on both their upcoming class in 2026, the current one in 2025, which I think is ranked 3rd or 4th in Conference USA for 247. And overall, I think it's going to be fun. And and Fielder's going to talk about it with Zach Kitley with the air raid. FIU's kind of bringing that similar style too with Nick Coleman and what they ran over at UAB. It was an air raid style offense that he's bringing over. And that's what Kewan said, and he's really excited about that. And he was able to bring back Kewan Jenkins. I think that's another big thing to note in this one. And Willie's mentioned many times, it was his toughest recruiting get was Kewan, to convince him to return to FIU just to share the vision. But overall, I think the expected guys that were going to transferred. Eric Rivers, Dean Patterson, so on and so forth. And FIU was able to bring in some pretty good replacements, and we'll talk about those soon. But overall, I think the program's in a good spot. Expectations are pretty high after 3 straight 4-8 seasons. Really want to get back on the winning ways, even if it's just 5. That's already a massive improvement. And I think a big part of that, too, is winning the rivalry game, which they haven't done since 2016, I want to say.
I guess I'll just piggyback off that. Before we start, I want to say that I'm a huge fan of the Willie Simmons hire. I've been a fan of Willie Simmons dating back to even before COVID and how he was able to handle the weirdness of the COVID season at the FCS level. And I remember they had a game against North Carolina where they had probably about 35 scholarship guys out and were not able to even field a competitive roster. And they didn't look out of place against North Carolina. And I've been banging the table for FAU to hire Willie Simmons. I've been banging the table for every school in the great state of Florida to hire Willie Simmons. So I'm glad someone finally pulled that trigger. And frankly, I'm glad it's FIU because frankly, the rivalry game needs a little bit more juice. And if it's, the fact that both these teams are competitive now, awesome. Sign me up. Now on to the FAU side of things. It's been a truly weird last 5 years for FAU. After the Lane Kiffin era, they go out, they hire Willie Taggart, and I don't think Willie Taggart did an awful job. But Willie Taggart didn't have the wins on the field, and unfortunately, his tenure ended after a second straight season of missing a bowl game, going 5-7, losing to Western Kentucky in overtime. Why do I still remember that game like it's the back of my head? I don't know, but truly I guess there had been no game that summed up that tenure more than losing in overtime to Western Kentucky with a chance to make a bowl game and potentially save some jobs in the area. But they fired Willie Taggart after 3 seasons, went out, hired Tom Herman, the former Texas Longhorns. A lot of Texas mentions in this episode. Kind of weird. More
than I thought.
I feel like too many Texas mentions on an FIU related podcast, but went out, hired Tom Herman, and I don't think the buzz had ever been higher. They go out, they hire Tom Herman, and every FAU fan is incredibly excited because they think that's the change that the program needs. And then 2 years later, he is fired midway through his second season because, again, the results just aren't on the field. And so I feel like athletic director Brian White just went a completely different way with this hire and hired a spry, young offensive coordinator who has never been a head coach in Zach Kitley, who runs the air raid offense, like Eric mentioned, like Kevin mentioned, right? Like an offense that should work in South Florida, an offense that should have a ton of success in South Florida. He will be calling the plays. He will be running the offense. He doesn't even have an offensive coordinator on staff. He is actually the head coach and the offensive coordinator, which might be the first time I've seen that at the FBS level. In with him, defensive coordinator Brett Dewhurst, who was at Coastal Carolina last year, interestingly enough, has never called plays at the college level. So that one will be interesting. And then for both FIU and FAU fans, a familiar face at wide receiver coach in DJ McCarthy, who has coached at both schools. He has coached at the school down south, and he is currently the wide receivers coach again at Florida Atlantic. So a staff that brings a lot of expectations to Florida Atlantic football, and the transfer portal movement, I'm sure we'll get to that later, has been exciting. And I think that for all accounts, like, man, it's never been a better time to be an FAU football fan over the last 5 years, because there's a renewed energy with the program. There's been a renewed energy with the success. And, you know, will that turn to results on the field? That's the age-old question for any new head coaching hire. But I have not seen an FAU fan base more excited for a hire for a football season than this upcoming one, which, given some of the last few years, I don't think anyone will change, will complain about having excitement heading into a football season.
And I think that's a good way to put it too, because at FIU, it's kind of the same way. New head coach, new staff that's bringing the juice to South Florida, something that we hadn't seen since Butch Davis, maybe. So, like, I think both programs are in a great spot, just in terms of the hype going into the season, the hype going into the rivalry itself. Expectations are pretty sky high for both programs, hoping to make a bowl game finally. Yeah. So I like where we're at in terms of expectations going into 2025.
Yeah. Fielder, you said it yourself, too much Texas talk in this episode so far. So let's clarify one thing right now, gentlemen. The best high school talent in the country comes from
South Florida.
There
and
you
only
go.
South Florida. You can build a hypothetical line, draw a hypothetical line from Treasure Coast down, and that's where the best South Florida, or the best talent in high school football comes from. And I will mention that every podcast if I have to.
There we go.
Yes. Preach, Fielder. I've never liked an FAU person more. I'm just kidding. All righty. We had Alex Krutchik, so, you know, he's an FAU guy. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty. So before we started this episode, I asked you guys to come up with 3 transfers you're excited to see take the field for the Panthers and Owls. And I feel like I know some of the answers for both of these squads. But we'll start off with Kev with FIU. Who are the 3 guys that you're excited to see take some snaps for the Panthers?
Yeah, it's 24 transfers, so there's a lot to choose from. I'm going to start with one that I'm actually pretty excited to watch, which is Alex Perry, Hawaii transfer, pretty tall dude, 6'5", close to 200-something pounds. Like, it's FIU lost Eric Rivers, Dean Patterson, their 2 top wide receivers. Juju Lewis is coming back. The Georgia Tech transfer from last year is coming back from an ACL injury. So I think someone like Alex Perry is certainly a guy who could help you with yards after the catch, 50-50 situations, something FIU really didn't have last season. It was more just, I'm going to run through you instead of I'm going to catch the ball over you, which is something that I think Alex Perry is going to do pretty well for FIU in this case. And again, it's a big dude who's quietly pretty fast and was a standout during FIU's spring game. So I'm really excited with him. Another name that I'm really looking forward to watching is Wesley Etienne, who was the Arkansas State transfer safety. FIU lost both of their starting safeties to the transfer portal, and JoJo Evans, who went to Louisville, and CJ Christian, who was a longtime Panther, went to Washington. So Etienne, a guy who's coming back to South Florida, played at Western High School, and I think it's a really good opportunity for him. He came here to start, and I think that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to start football games for FIU, and I think this is a guy who started a couple games last year for Arkansas State. And the last guy I wanted to note, and I think it's a more underrated name. I'm going to go with like a more left field name, Tavarsh Dawson. That's a name that I think a lot of college football fans may know just from his small stint at Colorado with Deion Sanders, popped off in a single game. And after that, fortunately, I think was removed from the program, went to Jacksonville State, played a couple games there, and that just ended up not playing. It was coach's decision, from what I understand, and comes to FIU back home. And Willie Simmons says that this is by far the fastest player on the team, believes that this could be a guy who could replace the production or the explosiveness that Eric Rivers brought to the table. So I think FIU did well with the transfer portal class. They addressed every need possible and brought some weapons. And, obviously Dawson, and I like Dallas Payne, the UAB transfer as well. But if I had to name 3, I think those would be the 3. but FIU certainly filled their needs throughout the portal and honestly through the recruiting as well in terms of the 2025 class.
Yeah, if we're talking about FAU, right, there's no better place to start. And Jake, I will sort of derail this a little bit, and I'm going to tie Caden Veldkamp with Easton Messer because they are basically tied at the hip for this offense. And wide receiver Easton Messer was Caden Veldkamp's favorite target at Western Kentucky. They come to Florida Atlantic together. And if you are looking for a perfect quarterback to run the Zach Kitley air raid offense, there's no quarterback who would have been available for FAU that is a better fit than Caden Veldkamp. When you look at what Veldkamp can do on the field with his processing, with his ability to get the ball out quickly, with his sort of underrated ability to make guys miss in space and be a threat in the run game, like this is a perfect fit for what Florida Atlantic wants to do at quarterback. And it is the most excited I have been for a quarterback since Nkosi Perry at Florida Atlantic, because I feel like this is the perfect quarterback for an FAU offense. This is a guy who has had a ton of production at the Group of Five level with Western Kentucky and led him to 2 bowl games, and has found ways to produce on the field, and now he gets to do it at FAU. And there is always going to be the chance that it fails, and unfortunately, that is just the reality of college football. But this one feels like the chance of it failing is as low as it's ever been for an FAU quarterback. And if that's the case, man, never been more excited for an FAU quarterback as much as I am for Caden Veldkamp right now. Keeping it on the offensive side, I'm going to go with tight end Reed Mikeska, who was at South Carolina, didn't play much at South Carolina, but he's an athletic freak at the position. And FAU has a ton of tight ends who might compete for its spot, but I think what Mikeska adds at 6'5" and about 265, 70 pounds, like he is a perfect fit for an air raid tight end. He's incredibly athletic, can play a little bit slot receiver, can play in line at tight end. And I'm going to make the first hot take of this new era of the Shula Bowl podcast, and it will inevitably be wrong. I am going to give that fair warning. And if it's wrong, you know what? You can clip it. You can tweet it at me later. I think Reed Mikeska is an all-conference player for Florida Atlantic this year.
Wow.
And I know that he has not played much, but I think that guy has all-conference talent at the position. And maybe it just doesn't get figured out. But I feel like the talent's there, and he was a guy who Miami was interested in coming out of high school. He had a ton of Power 4 offers, chose South Carolina. Now he's finally in the Sunshine State, finally in South Florida, but it's with Florida Atlantic, and I'm incredibly excited for what that brings to the FAU offense in terms of an athletic tight end who can make guys miss in space. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go with Liberty safety Jaden Sweeney, who, first of all, or Sweeney, excuse me. I'm a sucker for athletic safeties who can play in different positions, can play in the box, can play as a slot safety, or slot corner, excuse me, can play as a deep safety. And that's what Jaden Sweeney is. And FAU has had a ton of movement back there, most notably with CJ Hurd entering the transfer portal after his true freshman year, freshman All-American going to Vanderbilt. And now Jaden Sweeney and a few other guys looks primed to replace that production, replace the production of longtime Owl Jade Williams, who moved to UCF with quite a few other former FAU Owls. And I'm incredibly excited to see what Jaden Sweeney brings to this defense. And when you talk about a 3-3-5 defense with some of the things that Brett Dewhurst wants to do, you need versatile safeties who can play in a lot of different positions. Jaden Sweeney's that, and I think that this guy has the potential to be a big-time contributor for FAU in the secondary. And I won't make 2 hot takes today and try and say that he'll win Defensive Player of the Year in the American or something, but I think there's a lot of talent there that hasn't been fully recognized, and I think this is the year where it starts to be completely recognized for Sweeney, who did play a little bit at Liberty, but was never a full-time starter. I think he's got the potential to be a really impactful player for FAU in the secondary.
All righty. Those are just only a few of the players that everyone needs to watch out for both the Panthers and the Owls. Now let's get into some...
There's 60 combined transfers.
Right, I know.
So we could probably be here for 6 hours just talking about transfers. But
100%.
We have a few more things to talk about before we let y'all go. And one of them is the schedules. We know the games, we know the dates, we know the times, and we know the channels. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts on a couple of the biggest games to watch out for outside of just the Shula Bowl. So we'll kick it off with Kev talking about FIU. Both the Panthers and the Owls are taking on schools from the Big Ten. They're taking on HBCUs. There's a lot of cool things going on here. But what are some of these games that you're excited to see, Kev?
Yeah, well, I mean, aside from obviously the Shula Bowl, which will be at FIU this year, where do we start here? I think there's Delaware, new team in the conference, and CUSA. So FIU Conference USA added Delaware and Missouri State. FIU is playing both of them. Delaware at home, Missouri State on the road. I'm looking forward to that Middle Tennessee game, as crazy as that may sound. The last time FIU beat Middle Tennessee at Murfreesboro, Willie Simmons was the offensive coordinator at Middle Tennessee. So that tells you how long it's been. Anthony Gator, who's the defensive backs coach at FIU, was a player. So it's been that long. So with a very MTSU heavy coaching staff, or they were there for a while. Like Nick Coleman was a quarterback there. Willie Simmons was there. Obviously, I mean, Frank Ponce knows what it was like over there. He was there the last time they won a game at Murfreesboro. I'm looking forward to that game. I think FIU is a decent shot. I think the second best quarterback in the conference, though, with Nick Vadiato, is at Middle Tennessee, if not the third best. And then that home stretch of the season, like Liberty, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, that's a tough stretch right there. I mean, Liberty, always the class act of Conference USA. Jacksonville State, a team that is coming off the CUSA championship win, and then obviously Sam Houston State, who's undergone a lot of change, but do return their quarterback Hunter Watson. So I'm curious as to what that final stretch of the season will look like for FIU, and I don't think Delaware is a team that you're going to joke around with. I think that's going to be a decent team in the conference. And then obviously Western Kentucky. The last time FIU played out Western Kentucky was the worst loss in program history, losing 73-0. And that was not great. I'm pretty sure Caden Veltkamp must have played towards the end of that game at that point. So, it's a tough schedule for FIU. You have to go play UConn as well, and UConn. Again, they did not lose to a Group of 5 team last season. They went undefeated against a Group of 5, and they went to a bowl game. That's a really good team over there, and UConn.
And beat a power conference team in UNC.
Yeah, in the bowl game. So, it's a tough schedule, but I think FIU maybe – I mean, you would have to hope for a 2-2 non-con play, and then we'll see from there where the bowl game could happen.
For FAU, I'm going to start with that first game of the season on the road in College Park, Maryland, against the Maryland Terrapins. FAU has been looking for a marquee win for their football program, and they've had a few close calls. I think back to last year when they played Michigan State and had a chance at the end of the game to start their season off in the perfect way and the best way possible, and just couldn't do it. And it feels like that's been the trend for FAU football this year, is they constantly have a chance to do it in a big time opponent on a road environment, and they're just not able to do it. They're this close, but they can't quite do it. This year feels like the best chance. This is a Maryland team that's projected by most people to have one of the worst rosters in the Big Ten, and it's a team that a lot of people think is going to struggle this year. Mike Locksley, their longtime head coach, hasn't quite given that program the juice maybe it deserves, and it's been a lot of seasons of 6-6 play, the mediocre play that's plagued Maryland over the years. And it's also the first opportunity to watch Caden Veltkamp watch this offense in an actual game and not a spring game or a practice. And so that game, I think, is going to have a ton of juice for FAU, and it's a game that they have a good chance of winning, which, frankly, we have been able to say for a lot of these out-of-conference games against Big Ten opponents. They played quite a few over the last few years, but this one feels different, is what I'm trying to tell myself, so that when they inevitably lose that game, it's not as disappointing. I'm going to shift gears to maybe FAU's other rival, and that is the fake South Florida, the USF Bulls, who are in Tampa, Florida, of all places. Very southern part of Florida. That game has been quite a difficult one, or quite a testy one for FAU and USF. It was 2 years ago when when FAU went into Raymond James Stadium and beat the brakes off of the USF, and went for an onside kick in the fourth quarter when they were up 54-14, and caused a little bit of animosity between the two schools.
I remember that. Yep.
That animosity carried over to last year, where USF got the better of FAU. And so now maybe it's the rubber match. It's USF's homecoming. It will likely be a primetime game. Like, by all accounts, man, that game could make or break, could decide FAU's season in a way. And it could be the game that changes FAU's season in some ways, right? Like, if you talk about a game that puts him in a chance to potentially compete for the American or puts him in a chance to, secure a bowl game easily, that game feels like the one that is circled in red ink. And that's the game that, you got to win. Like, there's no excuses this year. You got to win that game. And then the week after, I'm actually going to go with that game against Navy, the midshipmen, in Annapolis. I love that Navy offense. I love what they're doing with Drew Cronin, with Coach Newberry, their head coach. Last year got the better of Army, who, of course, FAU lost to as well, and they have not had a lot of success playing these triple option teams. And it's a very difficult offense to prepare for in such a short time. But, man, that's a game I feel like FAU's got to win. I feel like that's a game where FAU's got to be able to beat a team that a lot of people view as one of the top teams in the American and a team that's going to be incredibly competitive in the American. And they don't have an easy American schedule this year. They have to play Memphis. They have to play Tulane. They have to play Navy. They have to play USF. Those are 4 teams that people think may be at the top of the conference at the end of the year. And so you could pick from a lot of these games. I think that Navy game is the one that's going to prove Zach Kitley, Brett Dewhurst's coaching chops in a way. How do you adjust to the triple option offense coming off of a potentially spirited game against USF, right? Like, are you guys ready for that game? Are you guys looking forward to the week after against Tulsa, or what does everything look like? I think that Navy game might be the most interesting game for FAU from a coaching standpoint, because a lot of things can change in a week, 2 weeks time, and those 2 games back to back could decide FAU season.
Oh, and there's UConn. So some familiarity there. But like you said, both teams, tough schedules in very interesting conferences. CUSA, a couple of new teams from FCS, but a lot of turnover pretty much everywhere you look. And for the American, a lot of teams that are competing for that conference title and maybe even a spot in the CFP. You never know. There is always going to be one guaranteed group of 5, or at this point, group of 6 conference member to be in it. So we'll always see what happens there. So as we start to close up shop here, gentlemen, I asked you guys to come up with one word to describe your expectations for either the Panthers or the Owls. Let's just get right into it. Kev, what is your one word to describe how you're feeling for the FIU Panthers?
How am I feeling? The one word. Like, I guess this is fair. High, like high expectations. Like, they're high. Like this is a head coach that since the day he got here has been talking about, this isn't a rebuild. We're going to retool. He clearly has through the portal. The moves show it for themselves. The offensive staff that he brought in, the staff in general that he brought in, the way that they've been going about practice, they've been bringing and this is the clear quote, like they're bringing the love back to football for some of the guys who had been in this program the last couple of years. And no knock on the last staff, they're great, but they're bringing the love back. They're making it competitive. It's been a highly competitive spring ball, highly competitive during the summer, and I'm sure it's going to be highly competitive in the fall. Like, no guy has their spot guaranteed except maybe Kiwan. Nobody else has a spot guaranteed on this roster, and I think that's the best way to say it. Like, that's the word, high. Like, it's high expectations for this FIU football team, which they believe they're going to be in every single game regardless of opponent, except maybe Penn State. They're going to be in every single game. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to this podcast. And obviously looking forward to the Shula Bowl, which, Kev Fielder was talking about how big of a game that USF one is. Like, as crazy as it sounds, the FAU game is probably like that for FIU, like a team that they haven't beat in such a long time, and to kind of tread water in conference play. And at this point, you're looking for the bowl game, not even the CUSA title. That comes along. Obviously, you'll take it. But, like, you're either going to go 1-3 in conference and non-con play, or you're going to go 2-2 heading to conference play against a team like Delaware that you should be able to beat regardless of the expectations that come with that team going into conference play. So I'm going to go with high that's my word, high. Obviously, I can't use the second word, but I think it's high. Like, that's got to be the word. And, like, yeah, this is an FIU team that needs to win this season, even if it's just 5 games. Like, you got to do something or go 6-6. Like, something's got to happen.
I've grappled at what the word is for FAU because it is, again, such a weird tenure or time for FAU in the sense that the expectations are constantly changing for FAU football with the way that college football changes. And, I think a lot of FAU fans expect them to some degree, be the next UCF. And I hate using that. That might be the only time in this podcast history that I use those words, the next UCF, for anything, because it's not easy to replicate what UCF did. But to some degree, like, those are the expectations. Like, FAU expects to be at the top of the American Conference in the future. They expect to be competing for a spot in the college football playoff. And you got to lay that foundation. And I think my word is like palpable, because the buzz is palpable for this FAU team. They've added a ton of transfers. They've added a ton of guys who will help them compete year one, whether it's competing for, 8 wins, 7 wins, and a better bowl game than maybe they get at 6-6, or it's competing for the American in a sort of wide open conference. And so I think when you look at their roster, and there are still question marks, when you add 36 plus new transfers and you add a defensive coordinator who's never called plays, you add a new quarterback, you add a new head coach, right? Like, there are a lot of question marks that have to get figured out. And truthfully, like, we won't know if those come together until they play Maryland, until they play Florida A&M in week 2, until they play the Shula Bowl, right? And I think that, like, when you look at their depth chart and you look at their season, there's reason to be excited. There is tangible reason to be excited if you're an FAU fan. Now they just have to put it all together. And so I think that, like, the buzz, it's there. It's palpable for the first time in a while. And it's no longer, maybe they win 6 games and we're just excited to win 6 games. Like, this is a new tenure that brings a lot of new juice and a lot of new energy, similar to FIU. And to some degree, they expect it to hit the ground running. We'll see if they do against Maryland in week 1. But I'm excited because this is the first time that I feel like both these programs, it's not just like looking forward to next season. It's finally, like, I feel like if we had recorded this last year, we would have been sitting here trying to, like, jump through hoops to convince ourselves that both these teams would be exciting in 2024.
Yeah.
Like, we no longer have to do that. And so, frankly, like, no better time to start this podcast, because I don't know if I could have done an hour last year going, yeah, you know what, this could be a fun year, and it's just not. But I think for FAU, right, like, I'm excited to see what this all looks like. And it may take a few weeks for it to all get going, but there's reason to be excited. And we haven't had a lot of reasons to be excited in Boca Raton for football reasons. Basketball's a different story, but for football reasons, we haven't had a lot of reasons to be excited. And so I'm finally excited to see what year 1 of this tenure looks like and what the energy is on the field. But it looks like this is a team that can definitely reach that next level that they've been missing for a few years now.
All right, gentlemen, a fun episode. I got to say, a couple of things to note before we close up shop here. When we wanted to revitalize the Shula Bowl pod, it wasn't the intention to get 2 people named Kevin to cover the Panthers and Owls. It just kind of ended up being that way.
No. That was the intention. Let's be clear.
Okay. Sure was the intention. I got you. We're going to try to get the audio only versions of these episodes up and running as soon as we can. So stay tuned on that. And we're going to try to make this into a recurring show. Going to get some awesome guests on. And as we get closer and closer to that Shula Bowl, the stakes are going to get even higher for this podcast. So stay tuned for all that. But for Kevin Barral, Kevin Fielder, and myself, Jake Gibson, thank you all for watching. And a big thanks to David Hondel and Eric Henry for stopping on earlier as well. And until next time, go for the Panthers or go for the Owls. But you have been listening to the Shula Bowl Podcast.